Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today we are unpacking a really high-stakes, multi-layered situation. It's basically a massive puzzle where a global geopolitical standoff in the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz is crashing right into an urgent internal crisis within Iran's military hierarchy. We're going to break down exactly what's happening on the international stage, and then we'll actually look under the hood at the shadow structures of the Iranian military to see how they are frantically adapting to a series of truly devastating blows. Let's just quickly run through our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the Hormuz standoff, Iran's high price for peace, a decimated military command, the resulting wartime reshuffle, their glaring intelligence gaps, and finally, what it all means for a prolonged war. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the Hormuz standoff. Now, there are two sharply competing strategies at play here, and they really couldn't be more different. On the U.S. side, under President Donald Trump, the approach is being described as a low-keying strategy, basically engaging in what he calls semi-negotiating. What this actually means on the ground is a distinct shift away from major combat operations, leaning much more into economic pressure and indirect diplomacy. In fact, Washington might even be willing to skip a formal, comprehensive nuclear deal entirely, just as long as Iran agrees to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It's really geared toward a quick declaration of victory so they can end the conflict. Iran's strategy, on the other hand, it's deeply conditional. They are just flat-out refusing direct talks with Washington. Instead, they're communicating entirely through intermediaries, all while setting an incredibly tough baseline for reopening the strait.
And that deeply conditional strategy directly informs Tehran's steep demands. That brings us to Section 2, Iran's high price.
To understand the leverage they have, you really have to look at the traffic flowing through the strait right now. Because despite the broader blockade and extreme regional tensions, the waterway isn't completely dead. Shipping tracking data shows that on August 8th alone, at least 17 vessels managed to transit this crucial choke point. And what's even more fascinating is that as many as 6 of these were reportedly operating as dark vessels, meaning they literally turned off their tracking to try and sneak through undetected. So even though Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says an agreement with Oman on new shipping routes is nearing its final stages, Tehran remains totally unyielding. They absolutely will not fully reopen the strait until their broader demands are met. So what exactly are those demands? Well, laid out by Iran's top security leadership, it's a remarkably steep list. We're talking an immediate end to U.S. military action and threats, the complete withdrawal of U.S. forces from around the country, the lifting of both the naval blockade and all economic sanctions, actual financial compensation for war damage, and finally, the release of frozen Iranian assets. Just look at how comprehensive that is. It's not just about letting ships pass, it is a demand for a total strategic reset in the region before they give the green light. But to really understand why Iran is projecting such aggressive posturing externally, we have to look at what's going on internally. So let's jump to Section 3, a decimated command. The sheer scale of the crisis facing Tehran internally is just staggering. A sustained series of U.S. and Israeli strikes has created a devastating reality on the ground, essentially a massive leadership vacuum. Right at the very start of the war, Iran lost foundational figures. We're talking the Armed Forces Chief Abdollahi Mousavi, IRGC Commander Mohammad Pakpour, Defense Minister Aziz Nasarzadeh, and Police Intelligence Chief Gholamreza Rezaian. All gone. Then, fast forward to April, a strike in Tehran took out IRGC Intelligence Chief Majid Kadmi. And by June 2025, 2 more senior Armed Forces General Staff officers were killed. So this wasn't just a few isolated losses. This completely gutted their top military and intelligence echelons, forcing them to frantically scramble to rebuild a functional wartime command. To patch these gaping holes, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei is maneuvering as fast as he can. Let's look at Section 4, the wartime reshuffle. You know, for a while there, Iran was actually running parts of its military hierarchy through an improvised shadow structure, commanders operating completely without public decrees. But what we are seeing now is the formalization of that command. The real standout move here is Ali Abdollahi stepping in as Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. He previously commanded the Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, and this promotion signals a major integration of the regular armed forces with their top wartime operational command. We're also seeing Ahmad Vahidi elevated to Commander-in-Chief of the IRGC, getting promoted to Major General. Then there's Mustafa Azadi handling cyber and new threats as his deputy, and Ali Osmai confirmed as IRGC Navy Commander. But actually, perhaps the single most politically significant name in this entire shuffle is Hussein Tayeb, who is stepping in to command the Basij. And Taib's appointment brings us perfectly to our next critical point, because replacing battlefield generals is really only half the battle. Section 5, Glaring Intelligence Gaps. Now let's just quickly clarify what the Basij actually is for some context. Basically, it's a vast paramilitary organization that's intrinsically linked to the IRGC. And historically, its primary operational role hasn't actually been on foreign battlefields. It's been right at home, actively suppressing domestic protests inside Iran. So the really crucial takeaway here is the strategic return of Hossein Taib to head this specific organization. Taib is one of Iran's most powerful, veteran intelligence and security figures. He led the IRGC intelligence organization for over a decade before losing the position back in 2022 after some security failures. Yet, he stayed highly connected. He was even reportedly involved in high-level deliberations regarding U.S. negotiations during this current war. So, bringing him back to lead the Basij, that carries a chilling, very deliberate message. By placing a heavy-hitting intelligence veteran in charge of domestic crowd control, Tehran is flashing a giant neon sign that they are bracing for a serious threat of internal unrest, right alongside the intense external military pressure.
But here's the thing, even with these swift military decrees, the overall picture is incredibly uneven, and it really shows the limits of emergency military restructuring. Sure, Khamenei could quickly fill roles like the chief of staff and Basij leadership with the stroke of a pen via military decree, but there are still glaring, unresolved vacancies in some of the absolute most sensitive sectors of the Iranian state. The IRGC intelligence organization currently lacks a publicly announced permanent chief. The police intelligence organization has the exact same issue. Plus, both the Defense Ministry and the Intelligence Ministry are operating under acting leaders. Why? Well, because these are cabinet posts. They can't just be decreed by the supreme leader. They actually require complex constitutional processes involving both the president and parliament. It paints this striking picture of a leadership frantically trying to hold the line militarily, while massive intelligence and administrative voids are just left wide open.
So what does all of this mean for the future of this conflict? Let's zoom back out to our final section, Section 6. Bracing for prolonged war. When you piece all of this intelligence together, a very clear narrative emerges from the source material. While President Trump might be seeking a strategic exit, an end to major combat, and a diplomatic victory based purely on reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's internal actions are telling a completely different story. They are definitely not acting like a nation packing up to go home. By formalizing this improvised wartime command, elevating highly trusted security figures like Abdollahi and Taib, and tightening their chain of command, Tehran is signaling that they are digging in for the long haul. They're preparing their military establishment for a prolonged, grueling confrontation that spans both foreign battlefields and their own domestic streets. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. We've seen the devastating strikes that absolutely decimated their original leadership. We've seen the steep, almost impossible demands they're holding out for in the Strait of Hormuz. And we've mapped out this hasty yet very deliberate reshuffling of their military hierarchy, which is sitting right next to these glaring constitutional vacancies. So the ultimate question moving forward is this: can this patched-together, reshuffled Iranian command survive a prolonged two-front confrontation? Can they withstand relentless foreign military pressure on one side while holding back the looming threat of domestic unrest on the other? It's a wildly complex, evolving situation, and understanding these structural shifts is really the only way to make sense of what might happen next. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and always keep questioning the structures behind the headlines.